Hi guys, and welcome back to class. Let's look at some more of Claudette Colvin, Twice Towards Justice. I want you to review pages 11 through 19 and annotate for evidence that helps you respond to the research question that you posed in Lesson 2. To begin, our focusing question is what motivated Claudette Colvin? Our content framing question in the reveal stage says, what does a deeper exploration of segregation reveal? And our craft question in the experiment stage says, how does asking research questions work? In our examine stage, why is it important to present findings succinctly? So in this lesson, you guys are going to be developing the process of asking and investigating questions as you continue your work with this text. So I want you to ask yourself, how does evidence in Chapter 2 help you answer your research question? Review Chapter 2 and annotate for stories Claudette Colvin tells about segregation and about her family, and share out in the discussion board inside of Schoology. Then there will be a series of questions about the novel so far. So what effect does segregation have on Claudette Colvin? How does Claudette Colvin's family and community affect the way she sees the world? How do these lines from Nikki Rosa relate to Claudette's life in Montgomery? And you can re-look at the Nikki Rosa video. How do your annotations and Nikki Rosa help you understand what's happening in Chapter 2? Now looking at the second full paragraph on page 14. Again, if you don't have the book, you can still use the YouTube video to go back and find this page. Choose one word from the paragraph that best sums up the importance of the paragraph and how it shapes the understanding of the relationship between white and black citizens in the Jim Crow South. What is the significance of the chapter title, Coot? And what does it reveal about racial segregation? Now we're going to examine the racial dot map. This will be inside of Schoology. It'll be a link, and it'll look something like this. This is the racial dot map, okay? Okay. And you can add labels, you can remove the coloring, you can add coloring, you can remove the labels, etc. Make sure that you pay attention. To the legend. So now I want you to ask yourself, what have you experienced about segregation from reading Claudette Colvin's account of her experience? Then I want you to analyze the dot map. What do the dots tell you about Montgomery in 2010? How can this chart help you understand segregation in Montgomery in the 1950s? And what doesn't this chart show you about life in Montgomery? How would you compare the type of information about segregation presented in this map with what was presented in Claudette Colvin's personal account? So for this question, you're going to have to look at the map and look at your annotations of how Claudette Colvin describes the city or describes Montgomery. Then I want you to draw your own map based off of Claudette Colvin's and according to Claudette and your annotations. Now moving on to our craft question in our experiment stage. How does asking research questions work? So remember, how did Claudette arrive at her question about the world? So here's some examples here. People always said I was smart too. He seemed proud of me for saying that. Claudette formed questions because of the things she learned from her mother. She formed questions because of the things she learned in school. She formed questions because of things she observed in her personal life. So when we look at this, this kind of helps us answer the question of how did Claudette arrive at her questions about the world? Well, she had questions because she was going through experiences. She was going through challenges. She was having conversations with her mother, and she had questions about what was happening in the world around her. So Claudette began to ask more probing questions, and the more she learned about the world, the more she did this, the more that she learned. You're going to adopt this model as you begin to ask more specific and complex questions as you learn more about Claudette. Now I want you to ask yourself, what do you now understand about the time period that Claudette lived in, that now that you know and understand what was inside of lesson 2? Why might it be important to express your developing knowledge about Claudette succinctly? So what are some ways you could make this question more specific? How does segregation affect teens in the 1950s? So what type of segregation? We could make this more specific by breaking segregation down based on race, or maybe people are segregated because of where they live. Now we could make this even more specific by saying what types of teens. Are we talking about white teens, black teens, teens between the age of 12 and 14, or 12 and 16? Are we talking about specifically are we talking about when it comes to the 1950s? Are we talking about Jim Crow? Are we talking about something else that took place in 1950s? So when you're thinking about a research question, you want to make sure that the question is specific. So what are some other ways that you could make this question more specific? How could you make this question here more specific based off of what we've just counted? Now to end our lesson for today, in our reveal stage, what does a deeper exploration of segregation reveal? For our homework, students need to read pages 21 through 23 and from Claudette left her house to emulate white girls, and annotate for evidence about Claudette's sense of herself. How does she feel about herself based off of these 2 pages? Now on to our vocabulary deep dive. In the third paragraph on page 8 of Cloden Colvin, you will use context clues to define the word exasperated. The word exasperated gives readers an important information about why the event described on page 8 played out the way it did in the summer of 1949. I also want you to reread the paragraph and identify context clues that help you determine what the meaning of the word exasperated is. Now record. Now let's practice with another word, the word embolden. What does this mean? Look to the third paragraph on page 9 to find this word and see if you can guess what that word means. Once you've written your guess down, see if it matches what we have here. Now let's try with the word degrading. I want you to complete a 3-2-1 exit ticket, and I want you to give me 3 synonyms for the word degrading, 2 context clues, and 1 inferred definition of the word degrading. You will find this word in the third paragraph on page 17. Which word from this lesson best captures Claudette Colvin's feelings at this point in the book, and why? So we talked about the word degrading, we talked about the word emboldened, we talked about the word exasperated. Based off of what we know, which one of those words best captures how Claudette Colvin feels at this point in the book, and why? All right, guys, that's going to be it for today's lesson. Again, if you need any help, please come to office hours Monday through Friday, 11:22 to 12:06 p.m.